Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I'm currently in the United States. My name is Milan Skolnik. I work for Amazon Air in particular, where I work on fleet strategy and aircraft transactions. I'm on the ISTAT board, and I'll be speaking today, as a ISTAT board member. Very happy to be here today with three esteemed panelists that I will introduce in a few minutes. And today we're going to discuss diversity and inclusion. Before I do that, I wanted to tell you a little bit about the ISTAT Rising Executive Program, which is sponsored by Avalon and offers networking and educational opportunities to ISTAT members and professionals with less than 10 years in the commercial aviation industry. So we offer networking events, educational offerings, content sharing, and more. And the ISTAT Rising Executive Committee provides all the resources needed for commercial aviation professional that they need to succeed in their roles and become future leaders in the industry. So a great program. You can obviously follow updates on that program through the portal of ISTAT and through social media. So without further ado, I would like my panelists to quickly introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about them. So Leslie, would you mind beginning? We begin by you, since you show up on that side of my screen.
Hi, I'm Leslie LaChance, and I work at Delta Airlines. I started here in 2005, and I'm currently the managing director of fleet transactions. So doing all of the aircraft purchasing, leasing, and sales or otherwise disposition. Also have experience in finance, maintenance planning, and network planning as well. Happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Very nice. Pooja, your turn.
Hi, I'm Pooja Gardamal. I am the owner of BK Associates. We are a DC-based appraisal company. We specialize in aircraft engines, all tangible assets, and intangible assets. So things like slots, gates, and routes, which have been a very big thing in the past year, as well as loyalty programs, which have also been a very big deal. Very glad to be here as well.
Thank you. Jerry, your turn.
Hi, Milan. My name is Jerry Butler. I am also on the board of ISTAT. I'm the prior president of ISTAT too. I'm currently the chief marketing officer of Merck's Aviation. Been there just over 6 years, and my responsibilities are essentially dealing with the kind of front-facing airlines, which has been obviously pretty interesting in the last 18 months.
Thank you. Very nice. So let's kick off this this conversation, and I'm going to ask you for our audience, obviously, please send us questions, and if your questions relate to the topic we're discussing, we'll be happy to raise it right away. Otherwise, we would be leaving 10-15 minutes at the end of our conversation to address your questions. So please. This is meant to be interactive, and this is meant to have a dialogue with you as well, not just among ourselves. So feel free to send questions along the way. The first question is basic questions that I have for all my panelists here, as diversity and inclusion can have different meanings for different companies and different individuals. Starting with you, Leslie, what does D&I mean for you? How do you define it?
I like to think of it as, obviously it's got the traditional connotation, right? Race, gender identity. But I also like to think of it in a little bit broader sense of, where did you grow up? Is that because that's maybe different from me? Did you go to college? Did you not go to college? Where did you go to college? Trying to really make sure that we include the perspective of everyone, because everyone's experiences are different from my own. And I think that helps us get to a better solution in whatever problem we're trying to solve.
Thank you. Jerry, how would you look into that? How would you define diversity and inclusion?
Yeah, not too dissimilar. We're probably all going to come up with similar answers. Look, I think the reality is that the broader group of people from a broader background, where they have grown up, where they've schooled or they've been educated, doesn't make a difference. You know, if you put that into a melting pot, you're going to come out with a better decision rather than going at it with 7 or 8 people who all went to the same school, same education. You may come out with the same answer, but it doesn't make a difference. The reality is that you're going to come at it at so many different angles. And I think that's massively important, right? And I also think it's massively important in the industry we're in, because, you know, we deal in a global business where there are massive extremities in terms of race, religion, you know, people, you know, all around the world, in terms of how you greet people, how you meet people, what holidays they're on, who's not. And I just think when you've got a melting pot behind you of, you know, of a broad range of people to be able to come up with a solution, I think ultimately you end up with a better solution. So to me, a more diverse and inclusive, you know, workplace, world, society, whatever it is, will ultimately lead to a better workplace, world, society, because ultimately you'll make better and more fundamentally right decisions for that business and those people.
Thanks, Jerry. Pooja, how do you look at it?
I think, as Jerry said, I think our definitions here are all going to be comparable. I mean, again, the idea here is to understand that there are differences, but embracing those differences, right? And I think, again, piggybacking on you, Jerry, I think that's how we make things better. There's so many more opportunities for growth once we understand and accept some of these differences and really learn from them, right? I mean, I think as you identify, having people that are of different backgrounds, you can honestly talk to and understand airlines and lessors that are based all over the world, because obviously aircraft are all over the world. We want everyone flying all over the world, right? And so I think, you know, I think it's a key piece of our industry.
Thank you. I mean, same here. I think we master the diversity piece. It's the inclusion piece that is a little bit more difficult to define. What does it mean to include? Does it mean to respect people's opinion? Make sure that we make everybody feel respected, feel heard. So it's kind of not such an easy exercise. Second question that I would have, and Leslie, I may direct that question to you first. What in the airline industry in particular have you seen in terms of changes you know, regarding diversity and inclusion, you know, throughout your career? And, you know, if you've noticed changes, how have they been? Slow or gradual or fast? It would be interesting to hear from your perspective.
When I started in 2005, I did not see a lot of women in the senior leadership ranks, and even fewer people of color. The change, I think, has been gradual, but it is starting to accelerate. I still don't see as many women or people of color in the leadership ranks that I think we should see. And I think it's specific to certain departments. Some are better than others. Within Delta, you might look at reservations and see more women in the leadership ranks, but not in the commercial team or in a lot of the traditional operations teams. So I think we have work to do on that front. But I do feel like the change is starting to accelerate at a more and more rapid pace. What I think is the biggest contributing factor is being willing to talk about it. When I first started here, it seemed like diversity was really talked about at the board meetings. And now that has really filtered down to your point earlier, Milan, a broader discussion beyond diversity into inclusion as well and equity. But it is happening at every single level within Delta. It is not just at the board meetings. It's not just at the officer level. It's at the individual hiring managers and supervisors on the front line to make sure that we are having the conversations and that we are recruiting from a broader base today. And I think that discussion has been really important.
Thank you. So it's true. We've seen a lot of airlines in particular, aviation companies as well, of course, to commit to a stronger and more diverse workforce. I mean, I encounter Qantas, for example, which has been very careful on their training program, for example, and making sure that they wouldn't have one woman in a group of all men, and they would pair. So they would be very conscious about the way they would do training so that it works and inclusion and diversity works, because without those fundamentals, it wouldn't work. Leslie, is there anything you think that in the culture of airlines that have changed or that has improved? And then my other question was like, how fast is it going? Are we going fast or not so fast? So look, any particular change you've seen as a kind of an example, and then do we think are we going quick enough or not?
I definitely don't think we're going quick enough. I think that because we're accelerating, we're kind of just at that beginning part, right? When you're starting to push the gas and it's taking some time for your car to catch up to the speed you want to be going. So I think we have strides to make in that. I also think that our industry in general kind of started from behind maybe other industries because it was so traditionally white male for so long, or at least in America, right? That's not necessarily the case in every country, but we have farther to go from that perspective. One of the things that Delta is doing right now to try to accelerate the conversation even more is we've started a report called Close the Gap. And it's produced, I think, quarterly to look at what are the 3 primary groups where we feel leadership is underrepresented at Delta as compared to the rest of our workforce. The 3 groups that we've highlighted are Black, female, and other ethnic minorities. There are other, certainly other areas that should be addressed, but those are the 3 that stand out the most to Delta as being underrepresented at individual leadership ranks. So whether it's managers, general managers, directors at the officer level, those numbers, we're trying to make sure that we are representing the entire workforce as it looks along the front line.
Thank you. Thanks, Leslie. Jerry, is there any outstanding initiative you've seen in the aviation industry, airlines or otherwise, or OEMs that stood out in terms of an effort to do better in diversity and inclusion? Any example?
I think the airlines are ahead of the financing world in aviation, right? I think that the financing, the lessor, aviation finance, banking community have been somewhat late to the game. I think airlines have, Leslie may say that it might have been slow to take up, but it's been a lot quicker than on the aircraft leasing financing side of things. Hold on a second. My kid, I'm on a call. I'm on a call. No school. He's just been informed that no school tomorrow. Sorry. Yeah. Is it only tomorrow? Out. Is it only tomorrow?
All right.
Is it only tomorrow? Yes. What? Okay. Sorry.
All right. No
because there's a COVID issue. The world we live in.
No problem.
So I think so going back to the point of, is there one specific thing? I think what I've noticed in the last, I would have said 3 or 4 years ago, if somebody mentioned diversity and inclusion around the airline world, it was kind of because it was in vogue. It was kind of like the environmental word. Let's just talk about it because everyone wants to talk about it. And I think in the last 24, 36 months, very similar to the ESG side of things. I know this forms with a component of ESG, but on the environmental side, it's gone from being, on the fringes, and everyone's talking about it nice to nice, and we'll put it in our board minutes, and we'll go on. But the reality is there was no substance behind it. Whereas I think now the train has left the station, and you're either on board this or you're not. And if you're not, you're going to be segregated. You're going to, that's fine if you don't want to be on it. But the reality is the world is moving away from people like you. And I think what we have seen now is a significant acceleration, and highlighted by some, race riots and a lot of other things that have gone on in society, right? And a lot of in the last 24 months, notably in the US, but in other countries as well, that have kind of, I suppose, brought the world together and said, we need to do something better with this. And I think that there's not one specific thing, but I think there's been an enormous change and movement in the right direction. And everyone might think, and we all in this call may think it may be happening slower than we wanted, but the reality is it's moved a hell of a lot in the last 24 months in the right direction. I just think it's taken a long time to get off the station.
Thank you.
I
Thank
agree
you.
with you. Sorry,
Go
can I
ahead.
chime in?
Yes, absolutely.
So I agree with you, Jerry, that I think there's been a lot of change, honestly, in the last, like you said, I think maybe 3 or 4 years, but I think from when I started in aviation and I walked to my first ISTAT, and it was sort of jarring what the ratio was of men to women in that arena. And I forget, I think it might have been Orlando then, or it might have been Arizona. But it was there were maybe 3 women, and I think 2 of them I brought with me from my firm, and the rest were all men.
And many of them were wearing gray suits as well.
I mean, but it's funny because since then, it's totally changed. I mean, I think, in the early years, it was a gradual change. You started to see more women, younger ranks, but I would say right now, I think there's a decent number of women in leadership roles. And Leslie, to your point, yes, definitely not represented. I'm sure Delta is very familiar with exactly where the statistics really are with this. And it's amazing that you guys are doing that, and tracking that. But I think we have seen a lot of change, and I think we should acknowledge that as well. I think people like Amelia Anderson with AWAR have done so much, and I think she started initially with her, and I think it was Dana Barta. We're doing the luncheons. Did anybody go to those?
Yes.
Yeah, and
those were very helpful.
They were very helpful.
Yeah,
I mean, having people at very senior leadership roles understanding that there is a dichotomy here, and differences, and trying to bridge that gap. And I think they've helped bring about change.
Yes, no, thank you.
You know what? All you need is a few male CEOs to have daughters, and suddenly their view of the world changes a lot.
So definitely improvement in awareness, and actually, you all have said the past 24 months have accelerated, and did COVID have something to do with it? And there's a question that is interesting here, could relate to what we're discussing, saying that some research is showing that 75% of high-performing women are performing better while working remotely. Pooja, for you, do you think that working from home for, I guess, women in particular, has been helpful? Maybe in juggling the work-life balance, or has it been helpful in the betterment of diversity and inclusion?
So our company BK has quadrupled during the pandemic in terms of size. We have experienced a tremendous amount of growth because, again, we value assets that are being pledged as collateral. And yeah, I mean, I think being able to be home has been honestly so helpful in trying to manage all of that, because I mean, it's, I think the first 8 months of the pandemic, my entire team did not have a single weekend. There was not a single spare hour. It was just brutal. And so if you had commute on top of that,
right,
it would have just been so much more. I mean, I think, most of us had a commute, right? I mean, whether it be 30 minutes, an hour, it's a lot of your day that disappears. And so to not have had that, it was very helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I hadn't honestly thought about that piece of it. But it's funny too, because we're trying to figure out whether or not and what our timeline is for return to office,
Mm.
which, is kind of an interesting topic as well, but for
Yes.
another day.
Absolutely, it's a whole other topic. Jerry, you were talking about ISTAT, and could you tell us a little bit what ISTAT has been doing in terms of improving diversity and inclusion, obviously at the board level, which you and and I'm the chair of the D&I committee. So could you sort of describe how we got there and what we're trying to do?
Yeah, and I suppose, we've taken, I suppose, the flow of the river that, has happened. Things have happened quite slowly. So you may remember, Iowa and, ISTAT
Right.
did an event, which was, really driven by Doug Runte, former president of ISTAT, to try and get that partnership going. And, I know how it came off, but if you look back at it, it's kind of looking back at clothing in the 70s. Would you really wear it? I mean, basically, there was a group of women put together, shoveled off into a corner beside a bar, away from everybody. And you think of it today, right? And if somebody did it today, you'd blow your mind, right? So, but what has happened, I suppose, in the last couple of years, firstly, everyone needs a starting point. And that was a fantastic initiative because it grew out of that and the conversation happened. And what happened is over the last number of years is, there's a process within ISTAT, as in with any massive society, we've 6,000, almost 6,000 members. Is that, and ISTAT, for all intents and purposes, Switzerland, it doesn't take positions on anything. It's a forum for people to get together at events and discuss things. So, one of the things, when I was president and other people around me as well was, is diversity and inclusion something we should actually be taking a stand on, given that we have never taken a stand on anything? And I felt it was. I felt that is probably one of the few things that we should be, taking a stand on. Now, with that came an awful lot of effort. But where we are today is we now have a standing committee in place, which Milen is the chairperson of, and Marilyn Gann was the prior chairperson of. We now look at metrics for everything. So a D&I was on the fringes of ISTAT, is now core to everything we do. So whether it's picking panelists, whether it's looking at attendee lists, or it's looking at, everything, anything we do that involves an event, that involves a meeting, that involves, if there's a D&I component of it, we look at that and we look at ourselves in the mirror and say, can we do this better? Does this meet the requirements that we want to do? And secondly is that, I think we as a society, we as a board want to be a diverse and inclusive group, and we want the society to reflect that also. So the board has is undertaking training, which is going to be led by PwC, which is a first for us. And we feel that an educated board, similar to what you were saying, Leslie, earlier on, is that when it comes from the top down, it's far easier to sell rather than the bottom up. And this is something that we believe that if we can get the board more educated on things like unconscious bias and stuff like that, people may not be, certainly I wasn't massively educated until I heard about it in the last couple of years. And you don't realize a lot of the stuff that you might be doing, and the negative impact it may have in a D&I scenario. So we've undertaken some board training. And the reality is that similar to where aviation, finance, or airlines, have gone with D&I in the last couple of years, it's been a slow moving feast to a point, but now it's accelerating very quickly. And the board is massively supportive of this initiative. It's here to stay. It's not just it's not just going to pop up and just be kind of a nice to have for kind of a year or two, because it's in vogue, so to speak. And it's front and center in everything we do. And I think you're going to subtly see, you may not notice, but I think Pooja, the next time, hopefully you go to an ISTAT conference, I think you should notice some differences. And yeah, and they may not be apparent to you, right? But I think when you look back in it, and people have said this to me for certain conferences, is that they look back at it and just go, wow, I said, there was more women on that panel. There was a much more diverse thing. And they don't know it until after the event. They look back and they feel actually more welcomed, more refreshing look at things. And, the hope is that that's we're going to continue doing that. And look, through Rising Executives, through
That's
everything
right.
else that ISTAT does, we are open to getting, people at all levels to try and offer us, ideas and thoughts about how we can better this, because this is something we're very, very, very serious about.
Thank you. And yes, agree with you. We're trying, I guess, at ISTAT to make diversity and inclusion part of all the processes. Similarly to when we think about safety or sustainability, it's at the forefront of everything we want to do. Leslie and Pooja, I was curious, like, to ask, did you have did you face challenges in your career, where you could derive some advice, I guess, to our audience here? Challenges, being a woman or being a minority throughout your career. Any kind of interesting example of a challenge you faced, how you overcame, and what advice you would give to our audience here? I guess, as a woman, I probably faced, multiple times difficulty that I really tried to overcome, and what has helped me, I guess, overcome those is belonging to Iowa, which has been sort of my beacon light, and my fellow Iowa board members and members have been a super big support system for me in overcoming one challenge after the other. So Leslie, any interesting topic there?
Wow, there's probably a lot of places I could go with that question. I think probably the one that women in general get a lot is the line between assertiveness and aggressiveness. That men can say things in a way that women can't. And it's not necessarily a conscious bias, but it's just a fact. And so that's something that I probably struggled with very early in my career, is how do I speak about a topic without being too aggressive on the subject, but still get my point across. And then the other kind of half of that is also knowing when to talk and when not to talk, because there's sometimes that the answer, but you're not actually the subject matter expert. So you're not the one who should give the answer. I think that was another hard part for me, where at the beginning of my career, I wanted people to know that I was learning and that I was progressing, that I could contribute, but I would talk on subjects that weren't actually in my wheelhouse just because I knew them. And so I had to really learn how, when to speak was kind of the other part of it. So it was the when and the how that I struggled with. I'm not sure there was a magic formula for how I got over it.
Leslie, can I ask you a question? Did you have a sponsor or somebody, either female or male, who helped you navigate your way through those kind of uncertainties, or multiple sponsors?
I can
I'm not
absolutely
looking to name them, just wanted to say.
Yeah, no, sure. I absolutely agree with you. A sponsor is so important. And that's something that I didn't have early in my career. And once I had a sponsor, and it's not like I found it, it just kind of happened very naturally. And it was a male. He did really amazing things for me in my career, as far as helping me to see when I could, change the way I speak or the approach that I took. But also he was out there recommending me to other people for, these reasons, X, Y, Z, she can do this job. And so that really helped to propel my career in the last, 6 or 7 years, was having him out there giving me that opportunity. That was
Thank
that
you.
the sponsorship was very important. Yes.
So I had someone similar. Well, I would say I had a mentor who I very, very much admired, and he passed away, and the aviation community lost him a few years ago. Bob Agnew, who everyone knew for his bow ties. And if you were close enough to know him, he was a very brilliant man, very soft-spoken, but just so good with people. Loved aviation, loved everything about it. Former Delta/Northwest, Leslie. And yeah, I think for me, it helped me and opened a lot of doors, because he was my champion, and he introduced me to so many people as someone that's knowledgeable, that really knows what she's doing. And I think it gave me instant credibility, which was just amazing. And I'm very thankful, and will always be thankful to him.
Amazing guy. And we actually I just add on that, because I love Bob to bits. And when we found out of his passing, I'm not sure if you're aware that when we did that, the board pretty much to a person wore bow ties in his honor at the Edinburgh ISTAT, because
Yes.
he's a massive ISTAT guy, just taken way too soon, but an incredible guy. But I imagine having him as your mentor must have been amazing.
Thank you.
It was. Yeah. And yeah, I love the event too. That was, I had always, Bob and I talked about at some point changing the former business card to one with a bow tie. Wouldn't that have been cute? But anyway.
Very nice. Actually, mentoring was a question that I had for you all, because it's definitely, it's not the cure for all, but it's definitely a tool that not just for women, but for anyone, and particularly for younger, more junior persons, or is a very powerful tool. And I encourage everyone in my team to have a mentor. I myself have a mentor as well, still within my firm. And I think it's a very, very powerful tool to navigate all these questions of, am I included? Am I heard? Am I really part of the whole team? And what's my path forward? How do I grow? How do I develop? So I don't know if there's any kind of formal mentoring program, Leslie, at Delta, or Jerry in any of your companies. Leslie, on your side, do you think that's an important tool?
Absolutely. And Delta does have a couple of different programs aimed at mentorship, some for those people that are earlier in their career, very high potential, and then also for other people who are getting ready for kind of a director level position. So there are a couple of different formal, both training and mentorship opportunities at Delta.
Thank you. Jerry?
Merck's is probably too small to have a formal program, but there's, look, I mean, it's incumbent on the leadership team to look after what I would say, not say newbies, but more junior staff, right? And it's incumbent on us to be able to impart knowledge and make sure they're okay in terms of, and that's been I think it's if the last year and a half has taught us anything, it's the question of, you need to look over the fence and see if your neighbor's okay. And that could be for anything. It could be your brother, sister. Mental health is, I know it's a big question, but I just don't think we've even scratched the surface of the problems that's going to happen on mental health after coming out of this when we come out of this pandemic. And I think that a lot of that goes to younger folks. And one of the things we have seen, I'm sorry, younger, I mean more junior staff. One of the big problems we've seen in the last couple of years is, to me, a lot of skills for junior staff is done through osmosis. It's done within the office. You're at the coffee counter, you're chatting to somebody in tech, you're chatting to somebody here, what's this? Or there's all these anecdotal stories come about. It can be in an airline, it could be in a bank, it could be in a valuation company, it could be in a lessor, it could be in a financier. And that's gone, right? That for the majority of people who aren't in an office anymore, or for the last year and a half, that's disappeared. So what we have seen is a lot, you know, there's been stalling on some career paths, and you suddenly need to find, how do you put jet fuel in those career paths again, from operating from a distance, to be able to drive them forward. And so that's ended up with a few arms around the shoulders, not just within Merck's, but in other companies as well, to basically say, look, you know, because you need to have that suddenly more direct, you know, discussion with people to say, you know, are you all right? And, you know, if you don't think you're all right, that's okay, but let's try and get you all right. And let's try and figure out how we can solve these problems. And I think, unfortunately, I think we're not over that. I think we're still in the midst of this, you know, this pandemic and this problem. And, you know, I think there's going to be more of that required as we go out. So I think mentorship, stewardship, you know, whether it's, you know, a friendly kind of coffee or a chat, is going to become far more important in the coming years than it was done in the past. And I don't mean that from a you know, a specific point of view. I mean that I think everybody here on the call needs to be doing it to junior staff, right? You just need to be engaged with them all the time. And I think that kind of mentorship, stewardship is going to become a much more stronger component of things going forward. Otherwise, businesses will crumble.
Thank you. So besides mentorship, I want to ask all of you, what can the aviation industry do better to attract a more diverse pool of talent? So, and again, we're talking about attraction. So is it through going to university, a more diverse pool of university? How do we outreach to attract a more diverse talent? Although, you know, overall the industry is diverse geographically and from a nationality standpoint, and but what do we do to attract a more diverse pool? And then I guess what comes after that is, how do we retain that pool that they feel comfortable and valued in the aviation industry? And then how do we grow them to get to those leadership points? Pooja, any thought there on what do we do to attract a diverse pool? What should we be doing?
I think it's kind of a hard question. I agree. Well, it is, right? Because again, and I say this as a business owner that's currently hiring, right? I mean, it's hard to get good people. There are labor shortages all over the place. But that said, I think, look, I came from a non-aviation background. I'm a former KPMG auditor. I done valuation in other industries. And so I think to your point, right? I mean, we go to universities, we go to different places, we do seminars like this, right? That we are an industry that is, you know, that D&I is a big target of ours, right? And I think that helps attract good talent. At the end of the day, it has to be about good, strong talent of all backgrounds. I think in terms of keeping them, I think I go back to your mentoring point. I mean, I think that for having the kind of mentor I had, I wouldn't be where I am today. And think that is a key thing. And I honestly think even with my own staff, I think it's something I need to work on. I think we have a diverse company, but I think mentoring helps, right? Keeping people happy, keeping them engaged. I mean, look, aviation is one of the most wonderful industries, right? I mean, I think that's why we've all been in it for so long, right?
Right.
You get into it and you don't want to leave. But I think
right.
making sure our people feel included, heard, and further mentored. They see a path to the future, right? They know what they can and can't do. I think that's a very important thing. And I am personally trying to work on that with my team.
Thank you. Leslie, what are your thoughts?
I think awareness is something that we need to be working on as an industry, because when people think of aviation, they think of pilots and flight attendants. But there are so many other areas that we need, right? I mean, almost every type of job is available in this industry, whether it's with an airline, with a bank, with a valuation company. You know, we need everything, right? We need tech people, we need people to throw bags, we need reservation agents, we need revenue management. We need finance, we need treasury, capital markets. So all of those different areas, I think a lot of people just don't know how their interest may actually fit in the industry. So I think we could do a better job. And it's not just of the existing labor pool. How do you get that back into colleges and into high schools as people are starting to think about where they want their career to be? That's where I see a big gap right now.
Agreed. I think awareness at university and even before high school. I know there's a lot of women's association that trying to get to that level and encouraging young women, especially the one that are studying, science and STEM and so forth, to get into aviation and to show how exciting. Obviously, there's big competition with the tech companies, and a lot of young people think that when you're in a tech company, it's more conducive to their generation. So I think aviation has also to sort of make sure that their culture stays dynamic, agile, young, so that you attract the young people who'd rather go in jeans to a tech company that wear a suit. So I think there's a lot of cultural changes that the aviation industry has to adjust to and to adapt to. Jerry, what are your thoughts on what should the aviation industry do to attract?
Well, you've obviously got the best of both worlds, because you work in Amazon and aircraft. How do you swing that? Look, I think, from where I sit, this is the coolest industry in the world. Like, tech may think they have it, but in reality they don't, right? Aviation is the coolest industry in the world. You have, aluminium cans propelling people around the world, in different places, everywhere, right? And to destinations around the place, right? And it's such a fantastic industry. The connectivity involved, forget about Zoom, but actually going to a beach in Mauritius or the Maldives or Florida, or experiencing that thing, meeting new people, drinking a cocktail somewhere in South America, all these things. You can't do it on a video call. You can't do it through tech, right? And what aviation gives us, it gives us the ability to meet extraordinary people in extraordinary places, right? And for people, I've always said, and I come obviously from the financing side of things, I have said it to people all the time. I said, it is, as Pooja said, it's like a drug, right? Once you get into it, it's like the firm, you're never getting out. And the reason is because most people don't want to get out. They want to make it work. And yes, aviation has gone through a very challenging time. It's the most challenging time in the last 20 years. And we're coming up on an anniversary of a very challenging time on Saturday. But like the last 18, 24 months, has been the most challenging time in the last 20 years. And there's not a complete end in sight, but there is a road in sight where we'll have to navigate our way through carefully, and there'll be speed bumps going down, but we'll be back, right? And people are going to want to travel. People are going to want to see people. People are going to want to see their families. People are going to go, run into the ocean again. And, and I just think that when that all happens, it's going to be, and the other side is, tech is new, right? And I said this to a lot of people who join tech, and tech offers a lot of amazing things, and it offers great benefits, right? You can work from wherever you want. Facebook are saying, they can work from, you want to work from Wyoming, no problem. Come here, but we're going to pay you 30% less, or you're going to, it offers a lot of things, a lot of benefits that maybe aviation doesn't do, right? And I think aviation needs to make a step possibly closer to tech to be a little cooler like it. But I think the reality is, to me, if you have the bug for aviation, and once you get into it, it's an extraordinary place. You could be talking to somebody in Sri Lanka one day in the morning, Australia in the afternoon, Seattle in the evening, Santiago, and you're sitting there talking to all these people. It's amazing. I just can't. I just don't know why anybody wouldn't get drawn into it. I mean, to me, and I know I'm speaking to the choir of this group here, but to me, it's an extraordinary. I again didn't start my career off in aviation. I was in a kind of life insurance investment business, and then I was very lucky to progress into this. And But it's, to me, it's you know, it's if you like cool things and you like, you know, visiting places and seeing people and meeting new cultures and experiencing things, and that's what kind of gets you going, then, you know, aviation over tech every day of the week.
So there's an interesting question that came in here. You know, we're saying it's an exciting industry. One of the one of our audience is asking, seems to be saying that it's not so easy to break into aircraft financing if they are already in a few years into their career and want to transition. So we're saying it's an exciting industry, but he's saying, he or she actually, I think is a he, that there's a stigma around career change. And it's not so easy to get into the aircraft leasing and finance.
Can I just
take it?
Can I just say something? I've come up with a number of folks that have suggested to me, right? You need to just be willing to take the plunge, right? You might be going 2 pay grades lower. You could be suddenly earning $50,000 less or $5,000 less. You could be sitting there married with kids or whatever it is, right? And saying, you know, am I willing to take this jump, right? And most people, when it comes to push to shove, right, and they're in a situation, and I know I'll talk about the kind of other side, the younger side first, second. When you're in that situation, don't want to take the gamble, right? I took the gamble at 28, 29. I got an inferior pay packet, and I just said, you know what? And I went on a 6-month contract into to Lombard Aviation Capital, which became RBS, on a complete punt, and I didn't know if I was going to make it or not, and I left a great job, and it's given me, I never regretted it any time since, but I was willing to make that step, right? I think there certainly were extremely high barriers to entry to come into this space, and that was driven, I think, a couple of fold. One was the size and scale of the industry. While it's big for dollars, it's not big in terms of human capital. And I think I think a lot of people were focused on, you know, and also location, right? Okay, like Dublin is kind of the quasi center of aircraft leasing, right? And there's pockets of other places around the world. And if you didn't really know somebody, it was hard to figure out how you can navigate through that corridor, get in. But there's a million and other ways of getting into it. You can go to Delta and be onto their tech team. And if you want to get into the financing side, you can end up being, there's plenty of airline folks that come from airlines on their tech side. I know a lot of people have come from Delta into the aircraft leasing business and aircraft financing business as well. So there's so many angles that you come into it. And I just think you need to be able to figure out, you know, figure out how best to navigate it. Try and talk to some people, try and, you know, engage with people, whether you get them on LinkedIn going, can I have 5 minutes to chat with you, whatever it is. And that's it. But I think there are less barriers to entry today, and there are more process inclusive, you know, kind of, you know, more junior jobs out there in terms of programs available.
Yeah, agreed. We talked about mentoring. I think networking is definitely a super important component of increasing our pool in terms of diversity and inclusion. Another interesting question that came in as we're talking about how do we attract more, how do we retain more diverse and inclusive? There's like, what are your views on quotas as a way of improving diversity, and how do you strike a balance between the very qualified people and meeting those quota? Leslie or Pooja, would you have any thought about it? It's always been I guess a conundrum on those, and I guess universities struggle with these, and does it create a reverse and conscious bias there vis-a-vis the ones that are not in those quota? What are your thoughts there on that question?
I think that's always been a slippery slope. I will add that I am certainly not the best person to be talking about quotas and how Delta approaches them. But what I can tell you as a leader in the company, I don't think we live by quotas. We live by, you know, how are we representing the front line and the overall workforce, and also our broader customer base. I think Pooja talked earlier about, right, everybody in the world wants to fly everywhere else in the world. So how do we also make sure that we're reflecting of the customers that are getting onto our planes? So, you know, we don't have this standard of, oh, I have to be 25% of X by a certain date, right? It's just by presenting the information, we can start making an impact.
So I think, you know, the question is an interesting one. I think things to keep in mind are that ultimately it's got to be the most qualified people. I think there are lots of very qualified minority women that are out there. Oh, wait, I think I've done fine. I don't think I think if you look, you will find it. I think it's a matter of, again, but ultimately hiring the people that fit the job, right? I mean, whether it's a client hiring someone or internally at a company, right? I mean, that is a key piece of this. And I think it's definitely out there. It's, like I said, a matter of finding it.
Thank you. So instead of quota, I guess should companies work rather with goals and targets?
Targets, yeah.
Yeah, so that they give themselves to sort of say, to remain conscious about the effort, right? When you're interviewing and when you're hiring, and make sure that you look at your metrics, your benchmark, and are you meeting those targets or not, and what you should be doing to do a better job.
Quotas can be dangerous in all parts of the world, not just in D&I, right? Because you have to do this, right? And you're being forced into a direction, good or bad, to make that decision. I think that when you have targets, it shows that you're directionally in the right way, right? Whether you hit those targets means you're directionally in the right way, but you've fallen short. If you've gone above those targets, you're directionally in the right way, and you're continuing to go that way. So targets to me are always a better caption in terms of how you would manage a business, and particularly in something like diversity, but lots of things. I mean, you know, quotas, I just think are a very, you know, can be very dangerous. I understand why they exist, but they can be very challenging for a lot of people to take under. Whereas I think targets or objectives, you know, in terms of trying to get to somewhere is and setting outlining those things over a period of months or years, saying, because your target in 3 years' time may not be the same target in 10 years' time, or sorry, in 1 year's time. And the target, and in order to get to target 3, you need to go through those steps. So saying you want 50%, you know, D&I on your board may not happen in 12 months, but it might be a good objective in 3 years or 4 years. But saying that you want to have 20% in, you know, or 30% in 12 months and working your way to it may work. And I'm taking arbitrary numbers. So I just think targets are a much better way of approaching this, and a much better, and also measuring. So measuring goals, understanding where you're trying to get to, have you achieved, and having people you know, responsible for trying to meet those goals and objectives and targets as well.
Yeah. So a bit of a provocative questions for you all. Those measurement, what are we measuring? Color, race? Do we measure sexual orientation? What do we measure? If you open up the number of metrics you could go to just sort of dozens, right? In terms of age brackets, and some consider a focus on inclusion on abilities or inabilities or handicaps. How do you measure, and how can you ask people? There's some countries where you probably cannot. So the US is maybe more advanced than others, where, you know, if you go to college, you have 10 different choices on your sexual orientation. Can we do that in the corporate world? Can we measure? Can we ask? How do we do that? Who wants to take that one?
I'm happy to row in. I think it's very challenging, right? I think the sexual orientation piece can go both ways, where people are very happy to, proud to be recognized as whatever their sexual orientation is. But there are also people who may not be wanting to be, out and about essentially, and wanting the whole workforce to be, and then just to be a number and a measurement, right? And I think there needs to be an awful lot of empathy regarding these things, right? Because you can't, they're the softer side of things. Like the hard side of things are sticking numbers on a piece of paper. But this isn't all just about numbers on a piece of paper. This isn't just about, have I hit 35% of my board level? Have I hit 20% of this? Have I hit the, I mean, there's other things as well, right? There's softer sides as well. And I think, for each business, I think, from our business side, when we look at it, and, Apollo are at the forefront of, I think Wall Street in terms of where they're going and trying to bring, D&I. But when they look at it, and they're doing a huge amount of amazing things. And when we look at ourselves as a kind of small little segment of that, I think it's pretty easy to look across the office of 35 people and understand, are we directionally good? Are we making, are we hitting certain measurements that would, if somebody came in to do an audit of our D&I program, how would we fare, right? I think for small companies, that may work. I'd love to hear from someone like in a Delta, when you've got, an audit of 75,000 employees or whatever it is, how that works, because, firstly, the pool of people you've got involved, you've got the most diverse group of people probably in the world working for you, right? So I'd be intrigued about how they would go about it.
So one of the things that Delta has is business resource groups, and they're kind of grassroots efforts. And there are, I believe there's 10 different business resource groups, and within that, almost 24,000 employees are participating in one or more of them. And they might be on Black employees, LGBTQ+, it's Latin and Hispanic, it's those with disabilities. And they are really key to the conversations, because they can collectively give a voice to the population that may not otherwise be heard, right? And so that's one of the things that, I talked earlier about, just talking about it and having these conversations is the place that we've started. And the BRGs are critical to that right now.
Where do they flow into? Sorry, Leslie, where do they flow? How does that chain of command work? So there's somebody who obviously gathers that voice together on, say, LGBTQ plus, and where did they go to now with that? Do they go to the board? Do they go to a...
So each of those groups falls under the realm of the DEI group. So we have an entire team focused on DEI. And so they, I don't know the exact structure, if it's like a board setup or something, but each of, obviously each of the BRGs has their own board. They have a president, a vice president, a secretary. And so they're collecting that information and then driving these conversations with the DEI team, which then itself is within the HR structure.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. We are at time almost. We have 1 minute left. So I really wanted to thank you, all my panelists, Leslie, Pooja, and Jerry, for taking the time to prepare and to attend and to think about this topic that we could, I guess, discuss even for longer. There was one more question that was interesting in terms of the hiring process, but we'll leave that for another time. There will be another Rising Executive online event in October, and then there will be an in-person event if you want to network at the next ISTAT EMEA conference. So I think this event is also recorded. It will be posted on social media, so make sure that you like it and follow other updates. I want to thank our audience for your participation and for attending our podcast or webcast, and thank you, ISTAT, for organizing that. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a great day or evening wherever you are. Thank you.
Thanks, Milan.
Bye-bye. Thank you.